Hey everyone, welcome.
Hey, Shira. Okay. Um, Shira, I'm just gonna flag. I do have something right after this that I need to jump to, so I'll do my best. Sometimes the end of the meeting gets away from us, but I'll do our best to keep us on schedule this time. Okay. Let's see, Matt. I see your message. Let me see how many we are. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and then 6. Okay, so we do have quorum. In the interest of getting started, I will call this meeting to order. I'd like to first let everybody know that Jen Myers has accepted a different position, and her new job doesn't give her the flexibility to attend EAG meetings anymore, so she has decided to resign from the group. It's unfortunate, but definitely appreciate all her contributions so far. And I let her know that. I'm sure you'd all agree. And, Dominic will let the commission know, and it'll be up to them to decide to appoint someone. I imagine they won't at this late date, but we'll sort of see what happens with that. And so that will make our quorum 5 going forward. But as always, it's good to have as many people here as possible so we have a good consensus about actions taken. So with that out of the way, I'll go through and review our agenda. So we'll start by approving the minutes, then we'll have our updates from our tag liaisons, update from the PUC, updates from the report writing group, and especially on the draft rule. Will be the goal to have draft rule responses finalized so that we can meet the commission's deadline of November 1st. We'll open it up for public comment after that. As always, just a reminder to keep cameras off and microphones muted if you're a member of the public, and we'll make sure you have time to share during that time period. And have EAG members keep cameras on when possible. Matt, I see your note. And then after we do public comment, we'll talk about the report writing and editing assignments that Ashira sent around in the packet. And then we'll have I think, overdue conversation about implementation recommendations and pull in some threads that we've, discussed about what the follow-up to the group's report should be. Do one more round of public comment, next steps, and close. Any questions or, yeah, Pike?
Yeah, can you remind me which category Jen Myers represented?
She was covering people of color in her section. So we have not gotten through yet and figured out what section she should cover. In the report, we also have a primary person drafting the report for sections we haven't covered yet, and a sort of secondary person. So we'll have to rejuggle a little bit. It's a good
Okay,
question.
no, I'm sorry. My question was confusing. Each of us represents a sector in the thermal energy.
Oh, I see. No, that's a good question. I think, just trying to remember.
Community action.
Right. Okay. Right. For her work as CVOEO. That's what we described that. Yeah. So definitely unfortunate that we don't have that perspective, but I think she's shared a lot so far. And, we do have Ben and Jeff who have experience with, the WAP program, which I do think sort of represents some of that. But obviously she'll be missed, and we'll see if the commission thinks it's best to try to get someone in from another agency. We'll see. I'd be happy to take feedback on that, by the way. I could kind of made an executive decision to say, I don't know that it's practical to get someone in for, essentially a month left of activity, but if the group feels strongly, I'm certainly happy to pass that along to the commission. Yeah, Jeff. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Did you want that right now, quickly, or via email?
How about now quickly,
Okay.
and then we can follow up with email.
So I've been filling in the weatherization directors, of which 4 of them work for community action agencies. I think a weatherization director from one of those 4, NITO isn't a cap, so we wouldn't want to use them, but could easily, my opinion, step in and kind of be fairly up to speed and represent the viewpoints of both community action and weatherization if if the people so desire. That's anyway, my opinion.
Sure, yeah, and I certainly didn't mean to, yeah, I was just thinking about practical at this stage, but like if you think someone could be sort of brought up to speed on what the clean heat standard is in our work so far, I think that would be fine. Jeff, do you want to maybe email Dominic and CC me and Ashira, and if you have a name of someone who's willing to, that might smooth the process. Again, I just don't know if the commission's going to be able to do it in the time we have left, but it's
Sure.
I'm certainly willing to ask.
I guess I'll first ask the four of them quickly, and then if there's somebody who would like to, I'll do what you just said. But if there isn't, I won't waste anybody else's time or emails.
Sure, absolutely. And I'm happy to meet with
Okay.
that person to get them onboarded. Just, you know,
Okay, great.
recognizing that there's a lot of ground we've already covered. Yeah, thanks,
Yep.
Jeff.
Thanks.
Any other comments on that? Okay, we'll see what happens with that. Okay, any other questions about the agenda items we're missing? Okay, seeing none, I will move along to the approval of the meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to look that over? Okay, I did notice that we did have a typo in Jeff's last name, Wilcox. It's just an inversion of the letters. So if we could get that cleaned up in the final version, that would be nice. I think that's the only issue.
Sorry, Mia, could you
any-
repeat that?
Oh, sorry,
Mine is
Jeff.
sub-
Yeah, no problem. Jeff's last name, Wilcox, is misspelt in the draft meeting minutes. It looks like a simple typo. Yeah,
Thank you.
just a small one. Yeah. And then, yeah, so does anyone have any questions or other edits on the agenda from the meeting minutes for last time? Okay, hearing none, I am going to call for unanimous consent to approve the meeting minutes from October 16th, 2024. And virtual hands are always helpful for that. Okay, I'm missing a couple. I don't know
I
if
can't
that's...
find my virtual
Okay, no,
hand,
Jeff,
but
I
I'm
see
voting.
you.
Okay.
Okay. And I think, oh, I've got Chris, and I know Matt's sort of on the road. I am going to take that as unanimous consent for approving the meeting minutes from October 16th, 2024. With that one correction. Thanks. Okay, moving right along, I'm going to pass this along to Emily or Matt from Updates from the TAG.
Yeah, just a heads up, the TAG met again last week. So we had 2 meetings back to back, and this was just because there's a lot to review on opinion dynamics, clean heat standard, TRM, or the measure characterization study that they've been drafting, and they're close to the final draft. So between 2 weeks ago and last week's on the October 24th TAG meeting, we mainly were reviewing opinion dynamics feedback to some questions the TAG had asked them previously. And then I know that I've previously mentioned that we are defining advanced wood heat in the clean heat standard. That discussion is ongoing, and it seems like we had 3 options outlined for the first TAG meeting, and last week we kind of adjusted some of those options, and we'll be prepared to vote on the definition of advanced wood heat, I believe, for this week's TAG meeting. And then we had a pretty high level and quick conversation on the draft rule and the companion memo. And the main question that the TAG asked on that is that if there's anything in the draft rule that relates to the TAG statutory requirements and tasks. And mainly it looks like we didn't find anything. We had a quick discussion that Matt led on the alternative proposal that was outlined in the PUC's companion report, but we didn't come to any conclusions on that. So yeah, that's mainly what we're working on, is reviewing the TRM and defining advanced wood heat. But I'll pass it over to I see Dominic has his mic unmuted, or Matt.
This is Matt. Well covered, Emily. I don't have anything else to add. Well done.
Thanks, Emily. Dominic, did you, or, okay, I'll go to Pike. Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that Jared Ulmer and Emily Levin presented some information about the health impacts, including the economic health impacts of burning wood in Vermont. I have asked the PUC, and others have asked the PUC to have some kind of transparency about how they are going to evaluate the negative impacts of some of the proposed clean heat standard measures, clean heat measures. You know, the economic toll of the health impacts of wood heating currently in Vermont is, according to Jared Ulmer and Emily Levin, between $100 million and $285 million a year. You know, when this is factored into the cost of heating systems, it wildly changes the estimates or the value of cheap, affordable wood heat, as ANR and DPS and others are calling it. So I appreciate the PUC providing the rubric that we put together. But right now, all we've heard from the PUC is that they are going to take this information into account. But I don't know, and I don't know if anybody knows, other than perhaps the PUC, and I see Dominic itching to respond, how the negative impacts of these measures are going to be evaluated, calculated, and incorporated into the clean heat standard.
Thanks, Pike, for I totally forgot to bring up the health impact. We did hear from Jared Ulmer, who's from the Vermont Department of Health. And if you review on the PUC website the meeting materials for last week's TAG meeting, you can see a starting document where Jared has started to outline the health impacts of the clean heat standard. So that is going to be an ongoing process. Thanks for bringing that up, Pike.
Yeah, and to further that, since there are, and I think, Emily, yours is one of the organizations that promote wood heat. I'm wondering if organizations could help us better understand how they allow people who burn wood heat or use programs that advance wood heat combustion, how they disclose the health impacts to people who are adopting it. So does Efficiency Vermont have any kind of disclaimer or information about health that they provide, or do other organizations?
I don't have direct information off the top of my hand on our wood programs, but I know that we're going to be having this discussion in depth during the TAG. And we have our experts who work on wood from Efficiency Vermont and VEIC participating in that discussion. So if you want to participate or listen in to the TAG discussion on advanced wood heat, we'll be having representation talking about those programs. And I think it really depends on where we end up in the discussion with the TAG on how we define advanced wood heat and what that means for existing programs and consistency. But if the EAG decides to have that discussion, I can prepare to have experts join in a future meeting.
Yeah, equally as important is how they define wood chips and wood pellets and cordwood.
Okay, any other questions on TAG business? Okay, if not, I will move that along to updates from the PUC. Dominic?
Hi, everybody. And hopefully my internet holds for this. I'm getting texts from my Xfinity all day that they're doing repairs in the area. So hopefully I'll be on for this full session. If not, I'll call in. It shouldn't be a problem. Mia already mentioned, but Jen has officially submitted her resignation. I am currently preparing a memo to go up to the commission, informing them of that fact and asking for the direction on what they would like to do per the group's adopted procedures. Also, as Mia mentioned, our quorum is now 5 people for a meeting with business to be conducted. So we'll keep you in the loop if there is anything else. And of course, looking forward to see if people that Jeff mentioned might be interested. The next big thing on our horizon is tomorrow night is the public hearing for the Clean Heat Standard. So that'll run from 6:30 p.m. Till we're anticipating about 8:30. We've got it officially scheduled until 9 p.m. We don't think it'll go past then, but it could be 5 people, it could be a couple hundred. We'll see. That'll be on GoToMeeting, and we'll be mentioning this tomorrow, but it is primarily a listening session. We had our technical workshop earlier in the month to really dig into the guts of the commission's draft proposed rule. And this session will be much more to hear feedback on that draft proposed rule. Of course, the most impactful feedback is that submitted in writing by the close of business on November 1st deadline. Those are the things that will take direct suggestions into how we update the rule. The contents of EAG and TAG's meeting will be summarized and presented to the commission for consideration of editing that draft proposed rule. There'll also be a transcript from tomorrow night's hearing from a court reporter that will also be considered going in. So we've got that going on tomorrow night. Starts at 6:30. We got about a 20-minute presentation just to set the stage. And then from there, we will be sitting back, listening, and taking notes. Any questions on either of those first 2 points? Jeff?
I got the link. Thank you. I don't need to register. No one needs to register. They just need to use that link at 6:30. I've sent it out pretty broadly.
Yep,
Okay,
it's
great.
Yep, that's
Thanks.
exactly correct. It's GoToWebinar, so that's a little different. It is just another video conferencing client, one that the commission uses fairly regularly. They've got a desktop app. You can also join from your browser. Just a heads up that it's not Zoom, it's not Teams, it's yet another video conferencing app.
Great, thanks.
Alrighty. If nothing else, which I don't immediately see, a little heads up on what. Oh, go ahead, Mia.
No, I just wondered, is that going to be recorded? I know you said transcript. I don't know if I heard recording available.
Correct. It'll just be the transcript.
Okay, thank you.
And then we'll just publish that transcript in the Dash rule case. And just for your information, the transcripts are at the bottom of VPUC. So if you go to other documents, there's a separate section for transcripts at the bottom, just FYI. Alrighty, so looking a little further out, like you said, public hearing tomorrow, then responses to our draft proposed rule are due November 1st. The commission has a lot of balls in the air. As soon as all of those comments come in, we will be working to update our draft proposed rule. In the next week or so, we anticipate publishing an order on pacing. So it is resolving the outstanding questions from the staff proposal that was issued this summer on how to set pacing. We do not yet have individual numbers for individual companies, but this will be describing how we are both drawing the line from where our emissions are now to our 2030 and 2050 goals as mandated by GWSA, and then how we will translate those goals to the individual obligations, what systems of information we will be using to make those calculations, and a couple other technical details on that front. So we anticipate that coming out in the next week or so. There's always the issue in question, which adds another possible 48 hours. And then our response to questions on the request for information. About a month and a half ago, the commission released a request for information for entities generally knowledgeable about program administration in the DDA sphere. This was issued in the -I&V case. We received one set of questions about the RFI from BEIC, which is officially Vermont's parent company. We have drafted those responses. They are being finalized and will be issued on or before November 1st, which was our deadline for that. So two things coming up in the next week or so. And then we are also working through the early action credits orders. That is probably going to be in front of the commission next week. So that's probably another 7 days until issuance, assuming all goes smoothly. So we're looking at probably in the next 2 weeks having an order on early action credits. So a lot going on with the commission in late October and early November. Any questions on any of those upcoming orders?
Dominic,
Alrighty, that's all. Oh, yep,
Dominic,
go ahead, Matt.
can you, I'm sorry, can you, the last thing you said about early action credits, what, can you repeat that or clarify?
Yeah, the order on early action credits primarily, we anticipate is going to deal with ownership differences from the regular program as described in the draft proposed rule, and what we anticipate will be the case for early action credits. And those are measures that are eligible under the main program starting January 1st of 2023. We are still figuring out the exact contours of that order. So at this point, I can't speak at too much detail, but ownership, timing, registration, and valuation. This order is going to address early action credits and how they may or may not differ from the standard program.
Okay, any other
All right.
questions for Dominic? Okay, so we'll next move on to the updates from the report writing group, which is really just circling back to the draft rule. I think we had a really good conversation about the draft rule last time and some of the feedback. The report writing subgroup sort of tinkered with some of that language that was recommended from the group and set up a draft, which I think, Ben, you sent Ashira the most recent version of what you'd like people to look. Okay, so Ashira, maybe you could share your screen on that.
Yep.
So I'd like us to go through what sort of Ben, tried to get this group's feedback in language. So thank you for doing that. And then I think after that we can discuss whether Pike, there's language we could bring forward from your additions that you sent a couple weeks ago. So let's start with what's on paper in front of us, and then we'll go through additional language. Thanks.
All right, so is this the one that I sent today, or
Yes.
okay, yeah, because I had sent one to everyone. I guess it was last Thursday or last Friday, and then I sent a revised one this morning to Ashira. And just basically, so I guess I wanted to change the language slightly, and kind of we can look at both, and really wanted to get some group feedback on this because obviously there's a lot here. But the changes that I made from the one that I sent the full group last week was regarding multifamily buildings. But as you can see here, basically the initial section here on the installed measures section, we really took some time in the subgroup to really dive into the subject of these portable window heat pumps, which really could be a game changer in the to really they are a clean heat measure on its face. It's a heat pump, but they are portable, so they can be moved from place to place, and they're not necessarily an installed measure, and they may not have a measure life of 10 years or more. So there is like a nuanced view of those specific pieces of equipment. In our discussions, we also discussed the fact that they are so new that we really don't have a ton of information especially information on how they function. You know, when looking at basically a technical reference manual perspective of these, I don't think that they are quite ready for. We decided that they're not ready for a technical reference manual, considering that they're literally just hitting the market and that there's only really a couple pilot projects that these are have been rolled out in. I know Emily can speak a little bit more to it, but I think that Efficiency Vermont is setting up a pilot project to try these out in Vermont. You know, there's really no data from that yet. So we basically took the opportunity here to opine on that and the fact that they are so new, but we see them as really if they are perform as they say they should, according to the website and the manufacturer, then these really could be a great energy saving technology for low income or really any Vermonter who lives in a maybe a living situation that doesn't have a great layout for traditional heat pump, or Vermonters in mobile homes, or I think what we thought about most here in this section was renters having these in their apartments where they could then basically utilize heat pump technology and you know, and then take it with them when they move out. So this would be basically a tool to get at the split incentive problem that renters face when looking at clean heat technology in Vermont. So that's what this top section here is. I don't know if anybody from the group who wasn't in the report writing group read this and has any additions or comments on this section. All right. Yeah, fairly straightforward. I don't think there's much super controversial here. Basically just pointing out, you know, everything we pointed out there, all the nuances with that. And let's see. Yeah, the substantive, I think a lot of the substantive conversations that we did have with regard to the draft rule was around multifamily properties. And let's see, yeah, that was under this 8103, yeah, 14, okay, perfect. And I think I did, yeah, I think the original document I might have sent last week had just the section reference there, I think was a little off. I think it was 8103 8A, but it's actually 14A. So yeah, so what we talked about here was basically a situation where it gets into both verification of income and also looking at basically low income or low and moderate income Vermonters, but also and how they relate to multifamily properties. Because it struck us that you know, in the rule it does say that you know, when the landlord is a recipient of a clean heat measure, then they can, you know, basically the customer, the renters within the multifamily building can be considered the customer for purposes of measure grouping the measure, and that would be basically determination of whether or not they are considered moderate or low income customers under the clean heat standard, instead of just looking at what the landlord themselves is or are. So it's a kind of a nuanced opinion here. So basically what we're looking at is could we have a mechanism or basically a threshold percentage of units within a multifamily building that we look at to essentially to spur you know, clean heat investment in multifamily buildings. The original conversation was, you know, can we say align clean heat policy with existing weatherization assistance program policy, which has, depending on the funding source, they have various percentages of you know, tenants within the building that need to qualify for their program before they can serve. This is the weatherization assistance program I'm talking about, before they could serve the whole building. So, you know, Jeff let us know that, you know, with state funding for some of their multifamily rules, they have a 25% threshold rule where if 25% of the tenants in that building qualify, then they're able to essentially serve the entire building, you know, at no cost to the tenants and fully weatherize and serve that building. So we thought, okay, well, to basically minimize administrative complexity, let's go ahead and have that 25% threshold level. And so we originally, the draft I sent out last week, basically had that train of thought to say, okay, obligated parties could go ahead and qualify a whole building as low income or counted as low income as long as they got income verification from 25% of the units within that building, to make it much more easy to qualify the folks in that building rather than having to go to each individual tenant. In thinking about that proposition, which I, again, the wording that I sent to all you last week, I did have some concerns, and I changed the language here to address those concerns, that you would end up having a situation where you might have obligated parties, essentially getting over credited for the amount of LMI credits that they are, or LMI Vermonters that they're serving if you had this rule in place. Because it could set up a situation where you have, a large multifamily building, you only verify a portion of those, 25% of them, and then you get credit for the whole thing. While it would be much more, much easier for the obligated party to go that route, you might have an imbalance there and end up leaving some low-income Vermonters out of the equation and not being served when they otherwise could be. So I guess I'll stop there and get some feedback from folks. The language that we have on the screen here is what I changed it to. And so basically, I was thinking about going back to the fact that we had a pretty broad discussion about credit ownership. I guess I won't stop there. Let me just give this one last kind of piece of background here, is where my train of thought was going. When we were talking about credit ownership, we decided that the Weatherization Assistance Program should receive basically full credit ownership for all of the measures that they install through their program. The commission did adopt that suggestion, and so that any program providing 100% incentive or no cost service to the customer would receive credit for the work that they did directly. And the client in this case, for example, a client of the Weatherization Assistance Program would not receive that credit. The OEO would in that case. And so if we were going to suggest that, okay, you have this 25% threshold, right now, Weatherization Program has a 25% threshold for their multifamily buildings. While they will receive credit, CHS credits for the work that they do serving their clients, as the commission has stated, I think there's a little bit of a gap there where you'd have a situation where weatherization would weatherize the building and would only receive credit for 25% of the essentially of the work that went into that building, because they did not verify the entire building, because you have this separate requirement under the Clean Heat Standard that is saying that you need to have customers attest to their income. So if the WAP agencies were not having customers attest to their income for 75% of that building, then they would not receive the credit from the entire building. So I think we need to, if we want weatherization to receive the maximum credits, then effectively we need to fill that gap, and they need to have this in place, which I wrote here on the screen. So I feel like I might be rambling, but does anybody have feedback to that? It's kind of in the weeds, obviously I've been thinking pretty hard about this one, but.
I feel like we could just maybe describe that situation, Ben. Like add a sentence or two, just noting that that situation exists. And I think like in the language you said, make sure that they receive all the credits, but I think they will receive it either way. It's just that additional administrative burden of getting them through a customer contract, passing the credits on, or just getting them immediately. And so I think because it's WAP and we agreed that it's about the administrative burden piece, we'd want, I think we're in
Okay.
agreement that we want to not have to go through that contract to the customer process. So I think we can just outline that this problem exists.
To reduce the administrative burden.
Well, this is
Okay.
like two things we're talking about. It's like,
Ye-
you know, how do we split up credit ownership with the units of different times? And, you know, I think there's a separate section on sort of what is the administrative process for that. I see this as sort of two things that are kind of coming together, you know, sections 2 and 3 of this memo, but maybe I'm looking ahead.
Right. Yeah, I guess what I was getting at here is that I basically the basis for making this change, and again, I am open to kind of either. That's why I wanted to bring this up in front of the whole group. This change that I made is that if we were to say just blanket, use the existing weatherization policy at 25% threshold for multifamily buildings, you would effectively, there is a potential that, okay, while you're verifying 25% of that building, what if the rest, the 75% of the building remaining is actually market rate? And so obligated parties would then be getting low and moderate income credit, credit or CHS credits for the entire building when actually they're serving market rate, and thereby taking away the opportunity to serve more low income Vermonters. Does that make sense? So that's like the basis of the where I'm getting at here is that I want to make sure that we aren't over crediting in the LMI category for obligated parties, and thereby having them creating a situation where they might actually be serving moderate or market rate folks, but being credited as low income.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we discussed this in the working group. I can't speak for Emily. I think I was personally of the approach that, you know, it's going to be very hard to reach renters under the clean heat standard for all the reasons we missed. If there's a way to, you know, I think I'd rather personally, from a policy priority perspective, you know, overserve some moderate income renters while encouraging, you know, obligated parties to reach the low income renters. So I think, Ben, you're not wrong that that's certainly a risk. I think in my perspective, it was like, how can we make it as sort of feasible as possible to serve low income renters, even if they're within other households. And since WAP has taken a similar approach where they're sort of willing to serve some higher income households so that they have the funds and flexibility to reach the lower income households, you know, I think that was the sort of approach I took. We recommended the 25% based on the conversation in last week, because that's the sort of most liberal definition that WAP uses depending on their funding source. We could always take a more restrictive one, like you have to prove that 50% of the units are. I think there's different ways to slice it, but yeah, I don't know if we're going to come up with a policy that gets maximum, you know, benefits and flexibility at the same time.
Yep. Point taken. I know we've already kind of discussed this in the group, but I guess I was putting this back up just to see if are other folks that are not included in that subgroup that had strong opinions one way or the other. I think it might make sense, you know, if we were to go forward with saying the blanket threshold level, then maybe putting some, I think might be good for us to I guess recognize the fact that maybe the commission would want to revisit this in a few years if they are seeing that, you know, there are a good amount of market rate folks being served, you know, under the low income category. You know, having the ability to change this in the future might be good. I just want to, speaking on behalf of the department, I want to make sure that we are these credits and, you know, the maximum amount of effort is being pushed towards, you know, this lower income group, and reduce any risk of, inadvertently serving, market rate participants at greater rates than need to be through this rule. So I don't know if any others feel strongly one way or the other about this, but we do have the other draft that I sent out I believe it was last Thursday, end of last week. That was the original one on the table. So I don't know if folks obviously had read that one leading up to this meeting and, had any talking points prepared to that one or one way or the other.
Anybody? I guess, Jeff, I know that you're kind of at the front lines of this, so you're kind of seeing some of these renter mixed income building situations. I don't know if you have any thought about how to sort of balance equity plus feasibility in an approach like this.
Yeah, the income eligibility piece is the biggest, one of the biggest, I don't know, what to call it an issue, challenges with multifamily buildings. With state funds, we've got more flexibility. With federal funds, which is a higher percentage of our overall funds this year, next, and the next, it'll be harder for us. So I think Ben and the group is trying to work with us. I don't have any concerns with this. I will say, you know, if you're gonna dole out credits per individual unit, that, and I'm not saying you are, I'm not sure what, but that was mentioned, that's going to be very difficult because usually the measures we do in a building, multifamily building, are an attic, in basements, and not a lot of individual stuff in individual apartments in most cases. So having that in mind, how you dole out the credits should be considered, and I don't have any opinions on that right now. Other
Yeah,
than
and I may have
it's got to be simple.
Oh, for sure. And it's I think I may have, when I was kind of introducing this, there's kind of a lot to this, so it's hard to get it all out. But so, you know, let's, I guess, just take an example. You know, weatherization program goes and weatherizes a 4-unit building. They verified 25% of that 4-unit building. And, you know, if there are, as we had it written, you know, if the other 3 units are market rate, the way we'd had it written is that, you know, the whole building would count as a low income or LMI credit producing building, which, you know, an obligated party, let's say the obligated party is the one doing the weatherization of the whole building, they would get credit for that whole building for basically all 4 units as being LMI. And I did bring in weatherization to that, where I said, you know, okay, they do the 25%. Under the current program, Jeff, you guys have it where, you know, you get, you verify 25% and serve the whole building, and that's the existing policy. And the other, I guess, under the clean heat standard, the other 3 units, you would still be able to go ahead and weatherize that building. The other 3 units may be market rate, but I guess the way it would go now is that the other 3 units would be credited to OEO as market rate credits and not low income credits, if they were to, you know, attest to their income, those individual units there. But yeah, I see what you're saying. I do agree that we need simplicity. And I guess as long as other folks, you know, if no one has concerns that we are going to inadvertently overserve, or I just want to make sure that the maximum amount of low-income Vermonters is getting served as possible under this program. And I think we all want that. So as long as no one has any major concerns that we may end up classifying market rate folks or participants as low and moderate income as a result of this, you know, then I suppose we can go ahead with the language we had last week. I just wanted to find common ground and really just come up with, I don't want to make it overly burdensome though. So maybe we're parsing hairs at this point, but which we probably are, but I just wanted to, you know, I wanted to be as good as we can get with the wording of this to ensure that the most low-income Vermonters are served and as easily as possible. So I think that's probably what you're saying, Mia. And I guess my intent here was to just bring up a couple different versions of this to see, you know, how palatable they were to the group. So in this version here, I'm basically saying that the 25% threshold would only be applicable to programs that provide, you know, 100% of the 100% of the cost to the participant, you know, pay 100% incentive, such as the weatherization program. In the other version, we have it that all obligated parties, including weatherization, all obligated parties and programs such as weatherization can continue to use, that 25% threshold level, basically taking the weatherization policy and applying it to the clean heat standard for continuity across policies. I think that's what we were getting at last time, Mia, right?
Yeah, and yeah, Ben, I think just to reiterate, I definitely think this is an important issue, and I appreciate you bringing it to the attention of the group. I think it's a discussion worth having for sure. I think I would just add, in the opinion of our working group, and my personal opinion, I think what the PUC has laid out in the draft rule is pretty unworkable without just more elaboration in one direction or another, just because it doesn't say what happens if you weatherize a whole building and how you're supposed to deal with credit. So I do think we're doing a service for the draft rule and the commission if we at least point out that you need to have some sort of rule for explaining credits. And I think it'll be more powerful if we can be specific as to what we think that rule should be. Thanks, Dominic.
Right.
So that's why, yeah, I think it does make sense if it is sort of evenly applied across, obligated parties for the reasons that I suggested. But I think it is an equity concern, and we just have to decide, is it better to just make it easier to serve renters in general, or be really specific about which renters we're serving? And, it
Right.
seems like we're comfortable as a group with the potential to have sort of moderate income or higher income renters sort of served alongside low income renters, but it's absolutely a discussion worth having, and we can make sure that we're all comfortable with that. So I'll give one more chance to have any raised hands about that language or concerns about that. Okay, so yeah, just to reiterate, so we all sort of know what we're voting on there. So there was the things about the heat pump, and mostly I think it wasn't the portable heat pump, mostly just flagging that we're concerned about what language would allow a portable or window unit to be used, has been described. And I don't think we came to firm conclusions, but we just sort of highlighted that the language needs to be looked at. We've got this definition of customer and an approach for working through multifamily buildings. And then the final one, which I think Ben touched on, but just to make sure that we're all on the same page, is we talked about if verification of income is known, we didn't think it added any extra value to have renters sign an additional waiver, or sorry, not renters, participants, if households would not need to sign an additional waiver. And that's for the instance of if you have someone like the Weatherization Assistance Program already performing extensive verification, you have a way to prove that verification is happening. It doesn't seem like attestation adds anything because it doesn't change the underlying ownership structure. We also touched briefly on, subsidized affordable housing, which also does rigorous income, and even the LIHEAP program, which also does income verification. So our position in this memo and discussed in the working group was basically, if income is verified, attestation shouldn't be additionally needed, and the commission could add language saying attestation or appropriate income verification. And I think we basically flagged that that would be something that the Department of Public Service, which is verifying the credits, would need to work with the person sort of registering those credits to sort of figure out how that works. So the remedy would be having the commission add verification as allowable and having the department sort of figure out how to implement that from a program decision. So I don't think that really changes the status quo, but again, maybe cleans up some administrative red tape. So that's what's in this memo that we drafted. I want to make sure we leave space for Pike's talking points as well, but this is the time if anyone else has sort of any comments about what's in this memo to respond to the draft rule, let us know.
Yep. And I just would add, Mia, which I guess we should ask which version we want to vote on. Is it this one that I've made changes to, or is it the first one that I sent out at the end of last week? Because they are different.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, it's a little bit confusing, so sorry.
I like this one.
It makes sense to do a quick straw vote on just the version, and then we can talk through that and then go ahead and talk about voting for the entire draft rule. Does that make sense?
Can you?
Yeah, I think it does. Yes, sir, go on, Emily.
No, sorry for interrupting. Can you or Ben just clarify which one we talked about in the working group? It was this one, right?
This
No, I
is
think this is the new.
Got it.
Correct.
It was the other one. Sorry.
Yeah, can we pull up the other one, Ashira? Are you able to do that? I know this is confusing. Yeah, so I think that the biggest change, Ben did in the one late last week, did adopt some language tweaks that the working group suggested. And then the version from the 29th has the language about restricting the sort of building level approach to WAP, and which
Yep.
I'm hearing, but I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, that the 25th memo might be acceptable to people, but we'll make sure we pull up both so people can see it and then vote. Sorry for all the confusion, everybody. Thank you for being encouraging me to be specific. Okay, so this is the 25th and the 29th, and I think the only thing is if you scroll down a little bit, Ashira, or I think scroll up for customer in the other one. I'm sorry. There we go.
Yeah.
Yep, keep going for the one on the right, the 29th. It's further up in both documents. Sorry. Further
Yeah,
up.
if you scroll, next page, you're right in under definitions customer for both of them. Yeah, so
Yep.
that's the only thing I changed. Mia's correct. The initial one from the 25th on the left basically explains the use of the threshold for all parties, obligated parties, and then the memo on the right has that restricted to using the threshold to basically restricted only to the weatherization assistance program, whereas obligated parties would still need to get income attestation from, basically you get LMI credits if you the customer attests to their income. Yep. So that's the big difference.
Okay. So I'm going to ask for a show of virtual hands, and I'm going to ask first for the 1025 one, the 25th one, and then for the 29th one. And bear with me because actually, Ashir, would it be possible to unshare so I can see? Is everyone clear on which memo you're looking at and how that aligns with what you want on this? Okay, so it would be helpful just to hide them so I can head count. Thank you, Ashira. Okay, so let's take our hands down, and can we raise digital hands if you'd like to, if you are more inclined to approve the 25th version, the October 25th version. And we will vote on the actual memo at the end, but I just want to get a sense of which one to work from. Okay, so this is the 25th, so that's two of us. Okay, and then the 29th, please raise your hand. Okay, so we got two. Okay. Okay. So I'm seeing a tie and not a lot of great participation from the group on this. I think my concern, yeah. Sorry, go on, Ashira, yeah.
Take another vote, and instead of either or, just like vote for in support of either. So it gives people.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, so I'm gonna try this again.
Let's ask to make sure that everyone who is part of the EAG does vote, and if you're
Sure, I'm gonna let
abstaining.
you handle this. Yeah.
Okay. So first we'll go ahead and vote on the October 25th version. And so if you're in support of this version going out to the PUC, and it doesn't matter if you're also in support of the other version going out, it's not either or. Just if you're in support of this version going out, we'll ask you to raise your hand. And if you're abstaining, we would like to, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but please let us know if you're abstaining. So if you're in support of the 1025, please raise your hand. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and if you can lower your hands. Okay, And irregardless of if you voted for the 1025, if you're also in support of the 1029 going out, can you raise?
All right, I meant to vote for both. Sorry.
And okay.
So
That makes me
So-
feel better that Ben voted for the first one because he didn't.
Sorry, I joined the meeting later. Can I just ask a clarifying question about the 29? So the 29th version is taking out a typical practice of the VAP program, where the low income criteria was between 25% and 65%. So that language is being taken out in the second paragraph. What's the material impact of that? So the first version was very prescriptive. The second version is not. So since I missed the earlier discussion, I was just wondering whether it's supposed to be cleaner in the second version.
So I actually think I was thinking about it differently.
Okay.
And maybe you're reading it different. And so this is good. You might have noticed something I didn't. But
Yeah.
so in the 25th, the one on the left that we're seeing here, essentially it does lay out, both of them are very similar, but the one on the 25th is essentially saying that that all obligated parties could go to a multifamily building, and as long as they receive income attestation forms from 25% of the households within that multifamily building, the entire building can count as LMI, as low income.
Okay.
On the one on the right, the 29th, it's the same thing, but rather than allowing all obligated parties to have the 25% threshold, in this case, it would be only the weatherization program or programs that provide 100% incentive or no cost to their participants could take advantage of the 25% threshold. So essentially limiting it only to weatherization or 100% incentive programs. Whereas, again, in the one on the 29th, in this version, because it says in the second paragraph here, it says this exception should only apply if the measure is implemented at no cost to the participants under a program authorized by the commission. So in other words, a regular obligated party would not be able to go to in the 29 version, go to a multifamily building and have the whole thing count if they.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Got it. Okay. I understand the exception now. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So in that case, I'm glad I didn't vote for the 25th. I will stand with the 29th. So thanks.
Let's quickly just redo the vote anyways. So if you are okay with the 1025 version, and it's not either or, just the 1025, please raise your hand. Okay, I have 4 and then, or 5. Okay, I'll give you a few more seconds if anybody else would like to raise their hands. Okay, 6.
I think Matt said the
yeah.
25th. Oh, he's got his hand up. Sorry, just trying to.
Got it. Okay, if you can go ahead and lower your hands. And if you're okay with the 1029 version going out, go ahead and raise your hand. I'll give you a few more moments. So on this one, we have 4. So it looks like we had unanimous consent for the 1025 version. So let's operate on that version. Unless there are any last minute thoughts on that. Okay. And so now when we're thinking of the entirety of the draft rule, are there any additional comments, questions, concerns that we want to make before we make a vote on sending this to the PUC?
I guess the one thing that I would ask if the group wanted to consider adding to this is a suggestion that the commission can change this rule that the 25% threshold rule that we just voted on, if they find that there's in basically unintended consequences of it, where they do find that there's a good, low and moderate income Vermonters are actually not being served as much as they thought. Basically some way for them to back it out if they find that, a bunch of market rate folks are actually getting lumped into the LMI category, unintendedly, or in an unintended way. I don't know if we wanted to suggest a mechanism like that for this specific suggestion. Does that make sense? I'm throwing it out there just to see if anybody, doesn't matter if folks feel one way or the other.
I think that would be fine. I think it would be helpful if we said like when to review this, like at the triennial period
Right,
where
that's
they
what I
do
was
that.
thinking.
Okay, I think that would be fine to sort of see how well that's going. I think in general, they'll need to do sort of something to make sure that this is sort of generally feasible, like to I think my problem with the draft rule is it doesn't really say what you should do for multifamily buildings. So like, it has to be something like you can't just remove this because it doesn't say either way what to do when you weatherize the whole building. So maybe we put this at the end, just because I think also when we talk about verification, that's another one where we're kind of taking it on faith that a verification process with the department's just going to sort of work. And so maybe at the very end of the memo, we say, the commission at the triennial review should review how sort of multifamily and renter household projects are going and kind of
Yep. That's what I was getting at.
is
Yeah.
needed. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
fine. I just think it should apply to both. Like, how well are we doing this multifamily system?
Right. Okay. Yeah, you said it better than I could. Yeah, that's, I guess what I was getting at is that triennial check-in, basically having the commission review, I guess, multifamily policies. How do we want to word that? But I just think having them sort of not a major check back mechanism, but just taking the time to review that and make sure there's, it's not having any unintended consequences or basically just review it. Multifamily policies. Because there is not a ton in the draft rule to comment on with regard to, like you just said, with the multifamily. How should we, I guess, multifamily policies should review credit. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, this is how to word it. But maybe we just say that. I mean, or do we want to just generally say that, for starters, that the commission should further clarify multifamily credit ownership, and then go on to recommend what we just voted on?
Well, is it clarifying it now, or are you asking Ben to clarify it or like review it? Like, I guess because I
Well, I
think
guess,
we've
yeah,
asked them to clarify. Mhm.
Yeah, okay, we did. Yeah. So yeah, that's where I was just kind of thinking about broadly how this is stated. But yeah, we have asked them to clarify. So now we're asking them to just have or suggesting that they have at the triennial update or triennial review, ensuring that basically residents of multifamily buildings are being equitably served under the existing rules of the Clean Heat Standard, I guess, is one way to say it. Does that sort of gets at, there needs to be what I'm trying to get at is essentially an equity check back for multifamily residents. Like, are low-income residents of multifamily buildings actually being served, or are a whole bunch of market rate folks living in the same multifamily buildings with low-income folks being served at a greater percentage? That might be tricky to assess, but I think thinking about that, at the triennial update would be a good start. And as the program goes along, there'll be more clarity to all this to begin with. So.
Okay,
So I
go ahead.
I've drafted basically what I've heard you say. So does anyone else have any thoughts on that last sentence, the addition of that piece?
Isn't it, wouldn't it be ensure low-income residents to capture Ben's point?
Thank you, Emily. Yes.
Okay. Great. And then, so I think we're at a point where we can vote on sending this to the PUC. So that would have to be a motion coming from the EAG.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that Pike, this would be the time to add what Pike recommended to get a final one, if that's okay. So Pike, I know you had some language about sort of review of consequences and things like that. Let me know how you think that fits into our recommendations on the draft rule.
Yeah, you said something that I should have marked down several minutes ago, about, the rules are, fairly scant on a lot of information, and, our suggestions trying to, you didn't use this term, but I'll say, micromanage the PUC in certain areas, or are we supposed to just send vague recommendations and let them implement it? And, I haven't been, I've been silent on this current conversation because I think we should just send old recommendations and let the PUC implement the details. So the minutia between these two pieces is, in large way, lost on me. But with regard to some of the big pieces, as I mentioned earlier, with respect to the health problems and the economic costs of the health problems, looking back on earlier PUC cases, what was it, 8550 and 7838, maybe the Springfield decision on biomass, the recognition in 8550 that burning wood might not be renewable according to its own definition. I would say that the PUC has dropped the ball on a lot of impacts on some of the decisions. And I think that we've spent a lot of work on the rubric, and I appreciate that the PUC has said that they are not going to ignore the unanticipated or even anticipated consequences, harmful consequences of some of these decisions. But I think in broad strokes, we should ask the PUC to historicize that, codify that somehow in some kind of document that is transparent. And I think the rule is as good as a document as any, since this is the document, the only document we've seen thus far. So that's a long-winded way of saying, yeah, I think we should ask the PUC to incorporate language that codifies their need to look at unanticipated consequences or anticipated harmful consequences.
I'll add for context for those who weren't there. We discussed this a little bit last meeting, and I believe, not to put words in his mouth, that Dominic sort of was of the preliminary opinion that this whole review of consequences is in Act 18. So, the commission would be doing that under law, but, didn't seem to think it would be a problem to add that to the draft rule itself. Again, Dominic, I'm not sure if you're able to jump in, but that was kind of what I was hearing about. Like, it would be fine to put it in our feedback, but it's something that the PUC has been sort of flagged to see. Is that a Dominic, if you're able to respond to that?
Yeah. Can people hear me all right?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, cool. Yes, Mia, I think what you said is accurate. I would just clarify that I don't want to speak for the commission on if that will make it into a second draft of the rule. We do appreciate it being brought up. I'll reiterate the position that that is in law and we follow the law. But if the AG thinks it would be better served by being more explicit, we would welcome that in written feedback.
Yeah, I would agree with Pike that we probably should add something suggesting that the commission does add something about the harmful consequences to the rule, since it was silent on that in the initial draft. So I think it makes sense for us to suggest that they add that language in a subsequent draft.
John, are you thinking, or Pike, just the similar language to what's in the statute?
Yeah, I think it just needs to be codified. You know, I appreciate that that it's in the law. I will quickly point out that in an act in 2012, Act 170, there was a requirement that DPS and ANR establish rules around greenhouse gas inventory, and over a dozen or a decade later, that those rules are still not done. So laws can be ignored by departments, state departments. And again, 8550, an order in 8550, PUC specifically says, you know, we need to evaluate and we're going to hold a hearing on the renewability of wood. And then PUC dropped the ball. No such hearing never happened. So yes, it's in the rule, and I hear that they believe that they're going to follow the law, and I'm just asking that there be a transparent method, procedure that we all understand about how they're going to follow the law. That's all.
And I quickly pulled up, Pike, what you sent over last meeting, and we did touch base on it. But is this language pretty close to the same language that you would be suggesting?
Yeah. Can you enlarge it a bit? I'm sorry. Let me get rid of my chat for a second. So is this exactly what I submitted, or did you change things a bit?
Oh, this is what you submitted.
Okay, yeah. So this is one option. You know, if folks agree with me in theory but don't like the language, I'm open to other language. This is just, you know, what I came up with in my comment to the PUC.
I guess I would say I'm worried about the whole part about having the public petition for a fuel's life cycle emissions rate. I don't know if we're getting sort of out of territory in the draft rule, and that would require sort of more of a discussion than we're going to be able to handle today. So I guess I would urge our group to keep our feedback pretty concise and maybe schedule time to have a more in-depth discussion for our final report or something. I just don't know that we've done enough research on this sort of second part of this memo.
Yeah, and I would agree that maybe that's beyond the scope of the EAG. However, back to our rubric that we developed, I think somehow codifying that, you know, that the harms that we've identified are going to be evaluated somehow is important.
That first bullet, the final clean heat standard rule must include a process. That seems like fine for me to add to our document. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I would say I also thought that bullet point would be appropriate to just kind of pull from this and put into our document. I think that sort of summarizes it. Yep. Because like you said, Pike, I think that we did have that in our rubric, and this would basically just kind of call that out. Because we do want them to opine on that.
Okay, so we'll get a chance to vote, but let's Asher, are you able to do a quick sort of cut and paste job to put that at the top of Ben's memo?
I've moved it over.
Okay. And then yeah, so I mean, I don't know about, I guess, if you scroll all the way to the top, maybe the first two paragraphs are kind of, I think, combined through there. I think that's sort of more of the sort of preface to where it's missing the draft rule, and we could combine, like, put that on top of the other part to sort of start the memo.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. A little bit of background, calls out the statute, and then just puts in the language that Pike had there.
There is some repetitive wording between that first paragraph and the last paragraph in green, so we might
Yeah.
want to just take one, not both.
Or
Yeah, we could
maybe
simply
the
say that.
second.
I was gonna say the
Or-
first paragraph should say, you know, the section, cite the section of Act 18 says, you know, this, you know, where it says H, and then have that, you know, be there, and then the final paragraph. Does that make sense? Similar to how I did it right below there, the 8103, like I kind of wrote section 8124 defines as follows. There's the quote, and then wrote a paragraph. Is that?
I think that sounds fine.
Yep.
Well, it looks like voluntary, so I suggest not to.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Can we stay muted unless
That wasn't
there's a
me.
comment? Okay.
So I just, it'd be nice if any piece of legislation or whatever we call this, it was a no-brainer that harmful consequences would be addressed. But I'm wondering, would people, so this starts out broad and then goes, shall include environmental burdens, and then lists a bunch of environmental burdens. Can we say shall include but not limited to? I mean, it makes it
that's
really.
quoting Act 18.
Yeah, these burdens come right from
Oh,
right
gotcha.
from the act.
Okay.
So
Never
maybe
mind.
that's something we want to deal with in our final report, and we can talk about a way to get that into our discussions, but for
Okay,
the purposes of this.
gotcha.
Good clarification, though.
Thanks.
Okay, any other thoughts on this piece? And let's take a quick show of hands on how we're feeling about the addition of this piece. So if we're happy with adding this piece to the draft memo, go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, looks like everyone. Matt, are you abstaining or are you just away? Seeming like he may be away at the moment, so we can go ahead and put our hands down. Okay. And anything else that we would like to add, change, edit, think through for the draft rule comments?
Sorry, Shira. Can we just add a like we have the bolded definitions, installed measures? Can we just add like a consequences and harms of clean heat standard?
Yeah, good call. That wasn't, there's no section to reference there on that one, right? Because it
No,
wasn't
I
in
don't
there.
think so. Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah, tried to make references to sections, but it's okay if it doesn't have one.
Okay. All right, anything else? All right, so if we'd like to make a motion to send this off to the PUC, not quite as it is, but probably we would have to have one person just clean it up and send it over. That would be within the EAG's power to vote now.
And just to have it all buttoned up, is there any volunteer, should this be approved, to clean this up and get this on the okay, Ben, I see your hand.
Yep. I can do that. Yep. Put it on EPC.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Yeah, and just,
Yep.
I think you've usually added when, that it's been approved by the EAG and adding in the proper header and stuff. So I've appreciated when you've done that. Thanks. Okay, so
Yep.
do we have a motion to have Ben clear up the language and basically just clean it up for publication, but keep the content otherwise the same for publication on the PUC docket? So would appreciate a motion if anyone's prepared to make one.
So move.
Okay, Chris, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, great. Can we have a show of hands? All in favor? Okay, and if we can lower our hands, there any in opposition? Okay, I'm seeing none, so I'll consider the remaining ones as abstentions. So I think Ashira, did you take down the number?
Yep.
Okay, great. So
Should we take public comment or on that?
yeah,
or-
we can take a public comment. I just wanted to. So I'm considering that motion, the language approved, and I will hand it over to Ashira to manage public comment. Thanks, everybody.
All right, everyone, great job. So we'll go ahead and open it up to public comment. Normally what we do is we give everyone 2 minutes to say their comment, question, etc. And that allows us to give time to anyone else who might have a question, and we'll circle back to you if we have some more time. So with that, I'll go ahead and open it up to public comment. Feel free to come off of mute and speak directly into the room if you have a comment or question.
Hello, my name is Gene Krause. I am from Bethel. And regarding the most recent action you just took, I noted that in Pike's original document, there was a second bullet that mentioned citizen participation and providing information around the harmful consequences. And I wonder whether you really wanted to include that as well as the calling to attention harmful consequences. I would encourage that you do so if you're so inclined.
Thanks, Jean. We did bring this up briefly. I know not in depth, and I was worried as chair that that wasn't a conversation that we had sort of scoped out for today. I think it is not, in terms of responding directly to the draft rule, there's things that are in the draft rule, and then there are sort of policies and participation methods that the commission is going to have to manage long-term. And I'm hoping we have time later in the agenda for an implementation discussion, which will have us respond to how we think the commission should manage participation and review of consequences going forward. So I think that's where we'll address some of those issues, but definitely noted that we didn't get to this, and I really just want to make sure that we complete the feedback we have for the commission. So thanks for that input. Are there any other comments? Okay, I'm hearing none, so we will make time for one more round of public comments as we wrap up. And we are running over, but not by too bad. So I'm going to turn this back over to Ashira to talk about report writing.
Hello.
This is
Hi.
John.
I'm sorry. I want to be sure that I'm connected.
Yeah, we can hear you, John.
Oh, thank you. Well, I realized that this EAG meeting had an agenda, and what I want to bring up is sort of of the moment. We're 7 days away from understanding what will be the fate of the Affordable Heat Act, and the commission, notably said we are considering an alternative. Well, take shape. If there is a likelihood that there will be 11 Republican senators, then it should be taking shape immediately after the election. And the EAG has such a part to play in that alternative that you should begin to put together a side group to actually start exploring that alternative. Thank you.
John,
Thanks,
if I
John.
could,
Go on,
go
Dominic.
ahead, Mia.
No, you can go.
As we talked about the other week, the Commission's previous work on Act 62 is really the basis of that discussion. And so we want to refer people to the prologue public process, or the robust public process we had in support of that. Understanding that our statutory responsibility is to develop this clean heat standard program. We are dedicating our resources towards that. At this moment, it does not look like we're going to have the staff time or contractor money to do additional analysis into the alternative plan. And so we are going to have to rely on the case that led to the Act 62 report for those details. I would encourage you to file into the Dash Rule case if there's anything you would like to bring up in relation to that. But at this point, we're going to have to stick to the direction given to us in Act 18. Once this gets to the legislature, the aperture for possible directions opens fairly wide, as you mentioned, especially with the outcome of the election.
Thank you, Dominic. But can you name one person or several people within the PUC who are going to have some part to play in advancing this concept, the alternative concept? Because we need to reach out to start talking to these people.
So, John, I'll just say that, the Equity Advisory Group is not a political process. We're determined to, follow our Act 18 obligations and make sure we provide as comprehensive feedback to what's laid out in Act 18 for the Clean Heat Standard and any requests that the Commission asks us to do. And I hope that sort of all of the equity issues that we raised in our final report and in the filings we've had to the PUC will be taken seriously by the legislature, no matter what, the election outcome is this November. And that, whatever the legislature decides can be informed by the issues we raise. So I think that's the direction that we've all agreed to take. And I don't think you're going to see anything sort of outside what I've laid out unless we get specific material to respond to. So. Okay, I'm going to close this for public comment now. We'll have another opportunity just before we close. So let's have everyone be muted who is not talking. Thanks. And I'm going to turn this over to Ashira to talk about report writing and editing assignments. Thanks for preparing that, Ashira.
Thanks so much, no worries. Let me just pull it up. Switching between a lot of things today. So this is what I shared around earlier this past week, which is just the report section responsibilities outline. And basically Mia, Dominic, and I went through and just kind of gave everyone assignments for what we need to do to really get through the rest of this report writing process. What we imagined is that for each of the sections, the person who is listed as the initial drafter will go through and take whatever notes and whatever discussions that we've had on the topic and write it to its full extent, to which so write it up as if we were going to deliver it to the PUC. Then for each of those, we have a first reviewer. And so that would be the person who goes through and edits it, sees if there's anything additional that needs to be added. And then by the review due date, we'll be able to bring it to the EAG. There should be minimal additions or corrections or edits that need to be made at the time that you bring it to the EAG. There may be, so for some of the sections, there may be specific things that you have questions about, or what we would recommend is you create a position that you'd like to take and draft it from that position. So if there's something that you're like, I'm not sure if the EAG is going to go this way or that way, you choose the position and just highlight it as a question. So to be able to ask the EAG as a whole. This will make it a little bit easier. As long as we have something to start from, it's easier to say, hey, I don't agree with this, instead of trying to form all together what it is we do agree with. So I think what we'll do is go ahead and walk through each of the sections and just make sure that we are clear on what we are doing. And I'd also love if you let us know if you have any questions about your section, or if for whatever reason you don't want to do the section that's assigned to you, we can definitely move you around. So before I do that, any questions? Okay.
I can just add a clarification because I think it's not very clear and it's my fault, of the limitations section and like what that means. So
yeah, so
I
we'll
had,
go through
okay, I'll let you go through. Yeah, I just thought there might be a question about that, but yeah, it's fair game. Go forward. Yeah, thanks, Ashara.
No worries. So yes, at the beginning, we're starting with the executive summary. So that will be the very last thing that we do. And Mia will go ahead and put together the executive summary. And our first reviewer for that is actually a group vote. So we don't have, I will just send it straight to you. So yes, and with the limitations for the clean heat standard, go ahead, Mia, you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I wanted to try to put some language in, that the group can get behind about sort of themes that were going to appear later, sort of in the vein of getting the costs and benefits and sort of big themes up at the beginning. So if people don't read through the whole report, they'll get it. And just talking about how, since the clean heat standard is such a market-based approach, there's going to be sort of a heavy drive towards cost-effective solutions, which may not be, the best way to reach low-income households or, meet some of the state's policy goals like weatherization. So it's really trying to be clear up front where we sort of see this sort of market-based approach. And I also wanted to add in this limitation section a sort of fairly brief but important section on workforce, which has come up in other sections as a limitation and didn't fit really easily anywhere else. So I wanted to kind of get those sort of prefaced at the beginning of the report so that people can keep them in mind when they're talking about our other sections and why we think of other issues we're going to raise. So sorry to jump the gun on that one. Thanks, Ashara.
No worries. Thanks, Mia. And for the first reviewer, we have Matt. Matt, are you okay with that? Second. Okay, we'll follow up via email on that one. The next portion is the benefits, cost, and recommendations. So we were hoping that somebody could go through, and like we've said before, some of the report sections are duplicative when they're talking about the benefits and costs and things like that. So we just wanted somebody to go through, read through all of the different demographic sections and pull out, okay, what are some of the benefits that are in common? What are some of the costs that are in common? What are some of the overarching recommendations, and put them into their own sections. We had Jen assigned to this, and Jen is no longer going to be part of the EAG. So are there any other volunteers that would be willing to take a first stab at this?
I can do it.
Thanks, Ben. Okay.
Just one logistical on that one. Logistical question. That has to be done after folks have their sections completed. Is that correct?
No, I would imagine that you could go ahead and get started on it now. Some of the commonalities are pretty clear. And then if we need to supplement it, we can later on. But yeah, it's helpful just to get those out of the way at the beginning.
All right, yeah, I'll take a first crack at it.
And I think I would also recommend, Ben can be listed. Pike, if you have sort of specific harms about, health and stuff that we just talked about, I think this would be a way to sort of get that down. So if you have something really specific you want to see, I'd encourage you sort of pass that along for inclusion.
Yeah, I'll just provide the memo that Emily and Jared Ulmer came up with.
Yeah, and I can edit that for, tailor it to the report. From our report, yeah.
That's a good piece as well. This report section responsibility table is also a good guidance for if you have something specific that you'd like to see incorporated, who you can go to send any sections or to talk through it with. So feel free to reach out to them directly to try to incorporate some of this. So Pike, we have you on the equity rubric. So the equity rubric is mostly done. We already have the framing and everything like that. Or not the framing, we already have the rubric. But if you could write up a little bit about how we got to the process of creating the equity rubric, the framing, what it's used for, in the context of the clean heat standard and the EAG, that would be great. Mia, do you have any other guidance on that front for the equity rubric?
No, I don't think so, but I think it would just be helpful to just flag, like sort of like you said, like why we came up with it, where we did, where we've encouraged the PUC to use it. I don't think it has to be long, but just to get it in there somehow.
I can handle that.
Okay,
Great.
awesome. And Srini, we have you as the first reviewer on that.
Okay, sounds good.
Great. Then the EAG's memos to the PUC. So we were thinking for that, we would just take all the memos that we've written and kind of do a quick summary of what the EAG has told the PUC to do. And that would have a link to each of the memos themselves and kind of frame up like what's already been done. What has the EAG already said?
Yep. Yeah, I already finished that actually.
Oh.
Finished that yesterday.
Okay.
So I can send that to I guess I'll send it over to Pike.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I think and yeah, you'll want to wrap it up with our final draft rule feedback. But we'll be doing that today. So great.
Cool.
So the next piece of that is the public engagement process. So for this, we were going to go, it's several parts, and this is you, Emily. So it's a review of the public engagement process and its limitations. So that includes the process with the consultant, the process with bringing in people like public comment within the EAG meetings and within the TAG meetings. Actually, it would be more just within the EAG meetings. A summary of what people have said. So overall, people want to see us cut emissions and are worried about the costs. Some of the other main things that we've heard from the public. It would also incorporate a summary of the public comments that we've gotten from the EAG meetings. So for that, you might have to go through some of the minutes from the meetings. And then we thought that there would be a recording of the public rule meeting on the 30th, but are you able to attend that, Emily, tomorrow?
I don't think so, but I feel like the transcript should be more than enough. I do have a question. It seems like the commission listens to all the different public engagement feedback that they receive. So I'm curious if the commission wants us to provide everything that's been said so far from public comment, or if there's something that I can pull it to be like, oh, this is equity related, and this is what we want to move forward from the public comment. It seems a little bit repetitive to just say everything that's been said so far from the public. So I'm curious if you can say more about that.
I think it's more if there's if there are things that you want to highlight that have, been repeated. And then a lot of it is more the process.
Yep, got it.
Yeah.
Mia.
Yeah, I think this is a really tough one because it's been sort of amorphous, I think it's worth sort of talking about different things. Like we asked the commission to do a write-up of, what was in Act 18, and we thought that was helpful, but then like we also didn't know that the facilitation reached as many people as we would have liked. And I think just like sort of a comment on sort of what we've heard, where we think it's gone short, where we've sort of advised them, just to kind of, I think really the audience is the legislature, and to catch them up on kind of what feedback we considered when we were doing our final report, and sort of what we heard. But I really do think you're going to have to do some editorial discretion on what
Yeah.
the totality of this wide-ranging project is. And I think that's totally fine. There's other ways for the legislature to hear about it, but sort of a summing up of what we heard and where we heard it from, if that's okay.
Okay, sounds good.
And in that as well, you can also add that we did have a public engagement subgroup, and what that subgroup did, and any resources that came out of that. And then would anybody like to volunteer to be Emily's second reviewer?
I can do that. I was on the group.
Thank you, Chad. Okay. The next part is just a quick summary of what Act 18 is asking us. So this would be another framing piece of the puzzle, and I think Matt just dropped off. But that is something that one of the interns, Mia's intern, has already drafted, so it would just be cleaning it up. And I'll follow up with Matt about that in an email. The next pieces are all the demographic pieces. So just like we've said before, putting it into, a lot of them we've already had conversations on, or for example, the renters piece, Mia's intern has already worked on it, and then it's gone through the draft writing subgroup. And so this would just really be cleaning and checking for grammatical mistakes and all of that kind of stuff. So for each of those,
Go
ahead.
Yeah, I'd add that the renters does have a few follow-ups, but I think they're pretty minimal. The group did excellent work, I think, really refining that. So the renters does not have much, but there are a few like ask so-and-so about missing data here, and like fixed citation and stuff. I think the moderate income the low income households is later. Okay, so we'll talk about that when we get there on the list, but the renter one is really close. So I can follow up with that.
Right. So Pike, we have you on that, and we can actually change the date to reflect the rest of them.
Yeah, it wasn't going to happen by yesterday.
No worries. And Emily, we have you as the first reviewer. For finalizing manufactured homes, we have Chris and Jeff. Chris and Jeff, are you good with that? Yeah, I see a thumbs up from Chris. Jeff, I see your head nod. Great.
Yes, good. Good.
For households of color, we also had Jen on that. Would anybody like to volunteer to be the initial drafter?
I can do that, Ashira. I'll polish that up. I think Jen got pretty far on that.
Sounds good. And moderate income, Emily, we have you as the initial drafter and John as the reviewer. Emily, are you okay with that?
Yep.
Okay, great. For non-household impacts, Mia, do you want to talk a little bit about that and the framing for that?
Yeah, so this one was one where I think we've had some discussions, but never really gelled this together. But, you know, Srini did some really good work on small businesses. We've also talked about obligated parties, and we sort of strangely haven't really talked about schools and municipalities. But I'd love a section where, you know, I think our energy has been mostly on household impacts, which I think it should be, you know, but I think it would be great if we could take the threads of, you know, Srini's great work on small businesses and you know, the stuff on obligated entities we've done, and just have a section that acknowledges, like, here are some impacts that aren't related to households that, you know, the legislature should be aware of, and try to get that in one section, even if some of those parts aren't super closely related. So just kind of do the best we can with that material.
I mean, from greenhouse gas emissions inventory perspective, the way several organizations keep track of the inventory, all the parties that you mentioned, like schools and municipalities, are part of that group, you know, that's already captured. But they all have different umbrella of jurisdiction and guidance, and you know what type of incentives are there. For example, the incentives that are there for the commercial businesses, I don't think they're there for school districts and municipalities and, you know, those type of entities. So I think the benefits are very different, even though the inventory is all in one group. How these entities may be served under what scope may be very, very different. I mean, I'm willing to take a crack at the other parties, other entities that are not part of the small businesses, which would be like the government entities and other organizations. I'm not sure about obligated parties. I don't know. I mean, that I would have to start that from ground zero there. So what's the intent here with respect to obligated parties?
I think Matt had some language that's in our outline that Ashira can share with you. I think just incorporating that into it, he could add some additional context.
Okay.
I don't
Because
think you have to start from scratch.
obligated parties are the ones that are not responsible for reducing greenhouse gas emissions that they put out today, right? They're actually a service provider, is that right?
Yeah, basically, I think it's just speaking to the idea that if you're raising compliance and the cost of business for obligated parties, that will
Okay.
have an impact on their business, and we wanted to
Okay.
mention it.
Okay.
Like I said, I know some of this is kind of a stretch. I think we don't want to waste the good work that we did, but just in terms of where our energies landed, there were some
Yeah.
threads we didn't fully follow up
Yeah.
on. I think it's just doing the best possible
Okay.
job to weave them together. So
Yeah.
you have my
So-
sympathies. It's not the easiest assignment, but just sort of
Yeah.
honoring the work we did so far.
Yeah. I mean, I can modify the whole write-up under the heading of non-household impacts, and then pull the small businesses and other entities separately, and maybe it's just one write-up, and then Matt can take a look at that. So, and by the way, I mean, the conversations I've had with business leaders, they're all like, you know, they can't work on something that is not defined. You know, they I think the business community is pretty much in the dark on this. You know, at least other stakeholders have had participation, but in the conversations I've had with business leaders, they are doing their own thing based on what IRA is offering and what federal programs are available. So I don't think they are even worrying about clean heat standard right now. They know that something is coming, but you know, they would rather wait till it is defined. So
I think that's fine to flag, just saying we haven't had full participation, but other people
Yeah.
will sort of have that impact, and it's worth just putting it
Yeah.
out there. Yeah, I think that's
yeah,
fair.
okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. On recommendations, so this is actually the next agenda item that we were going to go to. So this is implementation recommendations, and we were hoping that that John would be here so that he'd be able to take notes and take what we produced today and kind of write it into some prose. But he is not here today, so would anyone like to volunteer and at least take the notes for today and kind of put it together in a way that's understandable.
So am I already doing this up above? I've got the benefits cost recommendations. Is this recommendation specific to?
So
I
this
mean,
will
yeah.
be implementation recommendations. So these are some recommendations that we chatted about quite a few months ago that we're going to revisit.
So just in terms of like, we've talked about the, what happens when the EAG ceases to exist under Act 18? What
okay.
sort of signpost should we leave the PUC to follow up on for equity? So it's not necessarily for the legislature, it's just process, I guess, recommendations, implementation recommendations.
Okay. Didn't sign up for that at the moment because I have a lot going on, but I probably could end up tackling that as part of what I'm gonna do already. I mean, I guess, yeah, put my name there, and if I need help, I'll reach out, but I'll get a draft.
I can review that since Ben is listed as the first reviewer as well.
Great.
And Ben, you can reach out if you need support.
Cool, thanks.
And I think it's
Great.
worth emphasizing, I think done is better than comprehensive in a lot of these things. I think our report's going to ultimately be fairly lopsided. We go really in depth on some stuff and like not at all in other stuff. And I think we should review this to like, one, be just like coherent and sort of done in a way that you could reasonably hand to the legislature. And then also just make sure it like says the things we're really concerned about, even if we don't have really great research supporting some of the stuff. Like I think we just have to get it done and make sure that the things we really care about are in there. So I know some of the scope of this is intimidating, but if we have to cut to get it done, like that's fine. We'll do that.
Agree.
Great. Thanks, Ben. And then we already have you on households not readily available to access the clean heat standard. And then we have Chris as your reviewer. And then low income households, Jeff, we have you on that. And then Ben, we have you as the first reviewer.
Cool. I did have a question on the households not readily able to access CHS. So on that, I think I sent around a kind of what I have on that to the subgroup maybe last week. And I had kind of gone down the path of trying to talk about stuff that I thought might have otherwise not been incorporated elsewhere, such as talking about, homes that have vermiculite, knob and tube, kind of specific issues like that, the need for home repair. That, and then, I was going to talk about, I touched upon manufactured homes, for example, but I didn't go, I started to like do a deep dive on mobile homes. And I got about a paragraph in, and I said, well, hold up, we're going to have a whole section on that. So I really didn't want to go kind of step on other folks' sections with that. So I guess I'll take Mia's guidance there and just, I'll add to that as I see fit. But I think right now I do have something that I think could be passed as maybe complete. It's a few pages long, but yeah, just want to throw it out there. We'll figure out the overlap later, I suppose, but.
Great. Okay, good. Any other questions about the responsibilities, timeline, anything like that? Okay. So I'll move us over into our conversation today about the implementation recommendations. And this is it's within our final report outline. So I'll go ahead and share it with you all as well. And so this is, sorry, let me just share it with you. this is a conversation that we started at the very beginning of this process. We knew that there were going to be some recommendations that we needed to make just about the implementation process itself. And so we wanted to revisit this and kind of flesh out some of the section, what this might look like, and also see if there's anything else that we want to add to it. So Ben, if you would like, or Dominic, you could also, if you are able, take notes directly into this outline. But we're starting with talking about a mechanism for the PUC to ensure equity in its process. So this is once the EAG is finished meeting, how will the PUC continue to ensure that there's equity in its process. So some of the things that we talked about were continued consumer education, so providing information to the public on credit values, continued public engagement, and what might that look like? Continued convenings, is that one-on-one outreach, transparency, what does that look like? Consumer protection, so having an ombudsperson role at the PUC, potentially a consumer protection role at another agency like the Vermont Attorney General Office. Let's think a little bit about this section first and see if anyone has additional thoughts, ideas, things that they wanted to bring into this.
It strikes me that the ombudsperson, that's the department. Like, we are the ratepayer advocate. You know, that's why we exist. So I don't know if we need another role for that. Like, if folks have an issue with something in the regulated market, they contact us.
Ben, I wonder with this particular feedback, if people felt like, I don't know how likely it is, but say you're a house, you're a homeowner who thinks that they were somehow cheated out of a credit or something. Like, is it going to be clear to that person that like there's someone at the department who can sort of answer your call and explain how credit ownership works or whatever? Like, I think just making it clear how a person can be involved.
Good point. Yeah, because I guess, yeah, this is a newly regulated market here. So yeah, that's a good point. I guess just pointing out sort of the obvious to for lack of a better term there. But yeah, I guess for, you know, if it were an electricity, like they wanted to dispute something on their electric bill, they would, you know, I think most folks know to reach out to the Department of Public Service. That's why we're here. But I can definitely yeah, just iterate that, you know, the Department of Public Service, if this moves forward and fuel dealers are, you know, newly regulated entity, then the Department of Public Service will be the ratepayer advocate, as with other regulated markets. So yeah, good point.
So maybe our recommendation for this one, you know, understanding what the group was talking about, you know, months ago when this came up, was just basically to make it clear for consumers, like how the credit registration process will work and what they can do. Like, just make it really clear what to do if you have a complaint about this, since it's such a new process. And yeah, maybe that's a department thing rather than the commission. That seems appropriate.
Yep.
Great. Any other thoughts on ensuring that the PUC has a mechanism to ensure equity in its processes when implementing the clean heat standard?
We touched upon it earlier today, but I wonder if this is a kind of a more formal recommendation, is that in the triennial update or triennial review, considering that the equity advisory group is not going to exist, I think it probably makes sense for us to recommend that the PUC incorporate some sort of equity review in that process to ensure the equitable ongoing implementation of the program. And then we could go on to, or, you know, I'll take the first shot at this, basically list out the areas of concern that we have, or areas that we want to ensure that equity is in place throughout the entirety of this program. Does that make sense? I think that's pretty foundational to what we're doing here. And I think that probably would be a good recommendation to, there needs to be equity built into the process. And one way to do that would be to build it into the triennial review process.
I think that's worth, I don't disagree. I think it's worth interrogating more. You know, like, is the commission well poised to do this work? I think at one point the idea had been sort of generally floated to have them extend the role of the EAG like they do the tag. I don't know that this group has energy to do this indefinitely, or if that's appropriate. But yeah, I mean, I think we should be thoughtful about who we think is doing the equity review and sort of what ability they have to bring that experience to it. So I'd love for the group to sort of opine on who and how is the best way to do this sort of equity review.
Some group that comes to mind is like the interagency equity group there. Yeah, I'll have to dive in, but I think there are potentially other venues besides the PUC that would be a better to assess equity than, you know, the commission themselves. But yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I just think we should be, I don't know if anyone else in the AG has thoughts about, like, specifically who could do this work.
Right.
It would be helpful if you are able to just turn on your camera for these conversation parts. It just helps the conversation be a little bit more lively.
I will turn my camera on in just a moment. I have a cold, so coughing and blowing my nose off camera.
Fine. Yeah. Thanks, Emily.
So the question was, who would be able to be? Sorry, do you mind restating the question, Mia?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think Ben's point was good, and I think it's come up. The commission needs some way of determining equity and sort of keeping an eye on these issues and how implementation is going over the long term, if the Clean Heat Standard is implemented. And I think without saying like who specifically should do that work and sort of how it should be done, that makes me nervous that we're not sort of making a recommendation for how. So I think getting specific on what a process looks like and who is doing it, sort of an equity review process, I think is going to be important.
I think I found the name was escaping me, but the Interagency Environmental Justice Committee, and they were, according to the state website, were created to guide and coordinate state agency implementation of the Environmental Justice Law, Act 154 of 2022 specifically, but you know, that process is kind of ongoing, but it strikes me that either them or an adjacent committee such as them would be appropriate, because there's designees from, you know, a whole bunch of various state agencies that are already appointed to that. So I guess I'll kind of dive into that, ask around here at the department and see if that would be the best, or if there's other groups within state government that would fill that role. I'm
going to put the link in the chat so people can see it. This is a link to the group that Ben is talking about. And I see they have members of the Department of Public Service and ANR and the PUC. So
This is Emily. I'll do some thinking and asking around with our equity experts, Ben, and I can follow up with you if we have any other thoughts.
That sounds great. Yeah, and I'll touch base with Claire, who spoke with us a couple months or about a month ago. She's our equity manager here at the department, so she would be a great person to also ask.
So
Okay, so I'm hearing, oh, sorry, go on, Shu.
go ahead. No, go ahead, Mia.
Yeah, so I'm hearing, and none of this is final, like there should be something around perhaps the triennial review process, maybe sooner, maybe with this committee. I mean, like what other, and then we talked about sort of day-to-day, having the department sort of have a clear front door for members of the public who have issues under the clean heat standard. So those are two ways, like, is there any more we can delve into sort of implementation? I mean, I think at the beginning I had sort of thought that we could have some sort of like research or metrics type of activity, like we touched on it today, like how well are renters being served, and have we created some like bad unintended consequences with some of our recommendations and things like that. So do we want to get specific on sort of what this group or whoever should be looking into, and how will they know if the clean heat standard is successful or not successful?
Well, we'll have data, of course, of who's being served. We'll have that through verification at the department. We will know, whether or not obligated parties are hitting their low and moderate income targets, for example. So certainly I foresee some kind of report from the department to the commission, showing what, well, actually that's already going to exist when they, the commission reviews obligated parties annual, do their annual compliance review. That data will be in there. And so in terms of percent, of LMI population served and et cetera, within that report. So I wonder if that gets essentially compiled and then reported out at a certain interval.
Yeah. I have a suggestion, Mia. I mean, I think organizations like EAN, Energy Action Network, already play a very prominent role in assessing how effective Vermont is in the path towards, greenhouse gas emission reductions. Why not suggest that the PUC or the Public Service Department entrust an organization like that to leverage their resources and ask them how they would track the success of this program? I mean, that EAN is very good. I mean, they are able to get an amazing amount of data and speak with with amazing clarity about at each county or each city level what is actually getting done.
Yeah. Jeff.
Yeah, if we're talking about evaluating equity, nothing against EAN, but that's not their cup of tea. They're after carbon. That's not their cup of tea. Is that what you're suggesting?
They have the ability to access any type of data. So it shouldn't matter whether it is emissions or household information. They have the ability to put them in a very crisp, concise form. I have not seen any other agency in Vermont articulate what we have been doing. So if they have the intellectual capacity and access to data, I'm not saying that they are the experts on equity. They are an organization who's capable of pulling together very complex information and delivering them in a very concise, understandable fashion. Unless there is
I wouldn't
organization
disagree with
like
that.
Yeah.
I just don't know that equity is in their lens, that we would need the people doing this to have it in their lens, is all.
Isn't it just a roll-up of low and middle income households that translate to a certain specific metric or a goal?
I think there's a lot remains to be seen what it would entail looking
Yeah.
at. I mean, there's so much to be determined. Yeah, I made my comment. I don't think they would be the group for evaluating equity. I mean, they're great at looking at this energy savings and BTUs and carbon savings, but I don't know. Anyway, yeah.
I think we need to have someone in state government that can at least be responsible for it. I think they could sort of coordinate with EAN or but as a private entity, we can't tell EAN that they have to do it. So I do think someone in state government or at the PUC needs to be specifically responsible for producing this type of research. And, we could recommend sort of ways like Trini says that they do it. I just think there's going to have to be sort of the legislature will have to tell someone to be responsible for producing this research. I mean, that's how I think it usually works with statutory obligations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think within Act 154, which is the environmental justice law that I referenced earlier. So I just pulled up the language because I didn't want to misquote it, but basically each of the covered agencies, of which the PUC is one of them, has to create or adopt, current language says on or before July 1st, 2025, a community engagement plan, and describes how the agency will engage with environmental justice populations and how it evaluates new and existing activities and programs. So as a covered agency under Act 154, PUC will be already in statute is required to evaluate existing programs, which, the Clean Heat Standard would be one of them. And basically ensure that, how the plan, it says, they have to assess how the plan that they come up with provides meaningful participation and compliance with the Civil Rights Act, and it lists a whole bunch of other stuff. So, and they have to do an annual summary as well. I think the implementation dates of that law might have gotten pushed out. I don't know if the online statute has been updated to that. I believe it might start closer to 2027. But yeah, so maybe we lean on what's already in Act 154 and provide references to that process as it plays out. The interagency environmental justice group that Mia shared the link to, the Environmental Justice Committee, I think, is leading the effort to basically coordinate that state agency implementation of the law. I know there's a lot of work to be done, but I think that was the intent of Act 154, if I'm not mistaken. So that would be my suggestion. I don't know how others feel about that. It's kind of just talking about that process. That is, I guess, one issue with that is that if the implementation date of that law is not, it did in fact get pushed back, which I'm pretty sure it did, then there would be a couple-year gap there. If the CHS was to take effect at the next legislative session, there would be, and that law didn't go into effect until 2027. There's going to be a couple of years there that are not covered, but that might be our answer. That just kind of strikes me.
I want to push us forward a little bit as well. There is one last question about whether or not the EAG should continue in some fashion after January to continue to be, that equity lens, or if there's some other body that should be put in place. So I wanted to get our thoughts on that quickly and then open for public comment. Pretty big question.
Well, if
It
the
Sure.
department that Ben recognized, and I think we had one of their the chair come talk to us several weeks ago, is able to take this work over, from my perspective, that would be ideal. Because I don't know if I have the capacity to do this indefinitely. But I think it's important. I think some organization or group or individual should be doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me that the Interagency Environmental Justice Committee would be
Yeah.
the committee to take over this work. Unless the legislature had a different intent to that, but I'm pretty sure that was the intent, was to assess environmental justice and equity throughout all
Yeah.
policies of the covered agencies. So
Yeah. On the other hand, it might be like putting the fox inside the hen house, in charge of the hen house.
Yeah. You know, I can speak to, based on how cities have progressed climate action plans. And the climate action plan equity assessment is not trusted with one department. It is really a cross-functional team of different agencies and representation of those affected communities. So even if EAG has, if it makes sense for EAG to play a role going forward, it is essential that you have to engage representatives from the communities. You know, I mean, you know, all of us as a collective group here, I think we have done our best to represent those affected communities. But I have not seen the affected communities, you know, significantly participate in this process. So I think there needs to be a team of cross-functional agencies, plus good participation from the impacted communities to move this forward.
And that concept's in our rubric.
I like that recommendation. Maybe that is a separate one to say, I'm not trying to make a final thing, but maybe this interagency committee is responsible for sort of reviewing it, but we could say the commission should make sure that it does a robust public engagement process as part of its triennial review. I mean, that might be something they're already planning on, but I know it's always hard to get public engagement into a PUC case. It's not the easiest forum for the average person. So maybe that's a recommendation about incorporating public feedback into this process in an ongoing and, you know, sufficient way.
Thanks, Mia. Yeah, Dominic, we'll give you the last word and then we'll open up for public comment.
I just wanted to quickly mention that if the EAG continues to exist beyond when is currently dictated in the statute, the EAG procedures speak to a reappointment, meaning if people in this group think EAG should persist but do not feel personally capable of continuing to do this work, that's okay. We have a mechanism for you know, refreshing group members.
Thanks, Dominic.
All right, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to public comment. Is there anyone who from the public who'd like to give a comment?
Hi, this is Gene Krause again. I am deeply troubled that the EAG may no longer exist because I think that the input that you provide is needed down the road, not just at this particular moment and with this particular mandate. So if there is any way you could suggest the continuation of bringing these issues to the fore, I would encourage and support that.
Thank you, Jean.
Thanks,
Any
Jean.
response? Anyone from the AG have a response for Jean?
I would just respond that thank you, Jean. And that would be a great comment to put to the PUC through the ePUC website.
Thanks, Pike. Any other public comments, questions, concerns?
Okay,
Okay.
not hearing any, so let's move on to next steps, which I'll turn it back over to Ashira.
Okay, thanks, Mia. So for the next steps, we have Jeff will reach out to potential representatives that might be able to take Jen's chair on the EAG. The EAG members can submit individual written feedback on the draft rule by November 1st. Ben will send the draft rule comments to the PUC after he has edited everything, and then each EAG member has their report section responsibilities and the due dates. Most of the due dates for the first draft are next week. And so if you can, when you are forwarding them over to your first reviewer, if you can just make sure to CC me, Mia, Dominic, and Chris, that would be great. And have I missed any? Yes, go ahead, Pike.
Just a reminder that the PUC hearing on the draft rules is tomorrow evening.
Thank you, Pike. All right, anything else?
And yeah, so we'll have another report writing group on let's see, as scheduled November the 6th, as usual. We'll be diving into the low income group, the low income section content. Wow, it's late in the day. So we'll see. So I know that Jeff, you're writing that low income household section. I think it would be great if you are able to attend the report writing group, or at least, forward any progress that you have to me before that Wednesday meeting, so that we can try to work on it as a group and advance that.
Okay. Yeah, I'll follow up with you so I know the specific dates on that. I don't know if I can make that one, but I'll try to get you the report before then.
Sure. Yep. It's Wednesday, November 6th from 1 to 3. And
Okay.
like I said, any work that you've done up until that point, that's when the sort of first draft is due. But I know that that's a big section, and I think the report writing group can help sort of refine that content. So
Okay.
anything you can do, I can make sure that you have a copy. That was one that the intern drafted, so it's
Yeah,
kind of
could
in a
you
weird. Yeah, I'll forward that to
could
you.
you send that to me? And yep, I'll get it to you before then.
Okay. Yep.
Thanks.
Emily?
Just to clarify how we can write these sections, can we write right in that link that kind of has our starting outlines and notes, or do we have to write in our own separate documents that we'll email to everybody?
Great question.
I'm inclined to think not in that document, but Dominic, I didn't know if you were about to go off mute to remind us about proper procedure.
Yeah, my instinct is not in that document as well. I'm trying to think of any ways that it would work better, but the idea I have had about how we get this into a final form is we take each of the sections written individually, and then, like we often do looking at a master document during this meeting, we can pop them all together. So yes, I would suggest copy and pasting the section of notes out of that main document into something of your own, working it into something coherent, and then we'll bring it back together.
So it sounds like by November 6th, write up your section if you're assigned to a section, and then by November 6th, email it to Ashira and maybe Mia. And you guys will create a master link.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I think in terms of sending it directly to the second reviewer, CCing us, that would be good, I think. So like if you're the initial drafter, sending it to the second reviewer and then CCing us would be helpful. Then we'll have a copy, and then the second reviewer can get straight to it.
Should that be a shared document, or?
No, I don't think it should be a shared document.
Okay, so there's going to be two separate versions of the documents, the one that the person writes and then an updated second version that the first reviewer writes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so
Yeah,
first,
I know it's cumbersome.
You are ambitious and are able to get that to us before the deadline, you can just send it to me and Mia. Krista Dominic. But if not, we'll do another call for all the review documents on the 11th.
Sounds good.
Alrighty.
Okay,
Well, we
thanks
wanna-
everybody for all your work.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, I will call this meeting to a close then. Thanks, everybody.